Despite a lot of people saying that 2021 was an overall weak year for video games, I personally thought it was a pretty strong year for JRPGs. It was actually really hard to whittle this list down to just 5 games, but somehow I managed to do it. With that being said, I'm excited to share my top 5 JRPGs of 2021. Oh, and by the way, I'll have 3 codes for JRPGs hidden throughout this video, so make sure to watch every second so you don't miss them. No skipping around. I look at my analytics, I see what you guys do. And if you do manage to snag one of the 3 codes, definitely post a comment below so I know that you got it. At number 5, I have Fuga Melodies of Steel. I already sang its praises in my Hidden Gem JRPGs video, but I have to give it some love one last time. In the game, you play as a group of children try to save their parents. They've been captured and it's up to you to rescue them using this giant tank. Fuga has a surprisingly compelling story. It brings a really interesting perspective to the table on a somber war story from the children's perspective as opposed to frontline soldiers. And through these character side events, it really helps you connect with all the different characters and you get to know them in deeper ways. Also, there's a mechanic where you can sacrifice one of your characters to instantly win any single battle. I never did it, but it's really interesting that a game allows you to kill a main character off for the sake of a battle. It's kind of a really interesting mix of story and gameplay. What kept me playing hour after hour though was the variety of gameplay. Now, the majority of your time will be spent in these tank battles. The combat system sort of plays out like rock, paper, scissors, where you have one of 3 attacks that enemies are weak to. The combat is really strategic and you have to balance delaying enemy turns and then dealing damage. I personally loved really taking my time to strategize each turn to really figure out what the optimal play was. Now, in between battles, you move across board game-like maps where you can heal, gather parts to upgrade your tank, you can explore dungeons, and then you have sim elements inside the tank. Now, in these sim elements, you can improve your tank's weapons and armor by upgrading them, you can grow and cook food for buffs in battle, or interact with your characters. Now, the dungeons you crawl through are fairly simple, but feel satisfying nonetheless. And again, what keeps this game feeling fresh is constantly mixing up the gameplay. You never get bored of any one mechanic, and that's what I loved so much about it. Now, sadly, Fuga hasn't sold super well, but if it looks cool to you, it's on sale until January 5th on Steam, so let's show CyberConnect 2 some love, and hopefully we can get a sequel to this game one day. A game that really pleasantly surprised me this year was Persona 5 Strikers. Now, I'm sure to most people, myself included, they thought it would be another Warriors/Musou game with a Persona coat of paint, but it was much more than that. Strikers is basically a full-blown sequel. It picks up 4 months after the events of Persona 5 with the Phantom Thieves reuniting for a camping trip. Except for Kasumi. Sorry girl, maybe next time. As far as the story, there's this new AI app that's really popular that everybody seems to be using, but there also seems to be something more sinister going on. So you and your Phantom Thief companions have to dive back into the metaverse once again. No, not that metaverse. Like base, Persona 5 Strikers has a fun, addicting game loop. Most of your time will be spent in dungeons called jails in this game. More or less, each dungeon kind of has the same objective. You collect a number of MacGuffins to unlock a door and fight the boss. But in between, there's some awesome action combat that pulls from Persona 5 mechanics. You use your personas to exploit enemy weaknesses and then do all-out attacks and finishers. It feels so satisfying in the flow of combat. And what's cool is each character feels so unique, and it was fun trying them all out to see which one was the most fun to play. And also there's a new character named Sophia that fights with yo-yos, and she was honestly one of my favorite to play as. Of course, a big part of the modern Persona games are the life sim aspects, and Strikers is no different. When you're not battling through jails, you can explore the cities you travel to, and there are quite a few, and they're pretty big, and there you can interact with your fellow Phantom Thieves. Now, I'll admit it's not as in-depth as Persona 5, but it was still compelling nonetheless. And there's also small side events in certain cities that you can bring certain characters to participate, like this Ferris wheel ride right here. Persona 5 Strikers was a fun game in its own right, but it was just good to see all of Phantom Thieves once again. Another game that really surprised me this year was Monster Hunter Stories 2. I generally knew what kind of game it was, it kind of played like Pokemon, but that's about it. But once I dove in, I was so addicted. Cleverly, Monster Hunter Stories 2 does 2 things to keep you hooked. First is capturing the different monsters. There are a number of huge zones filled with tons of monsters. To get them on your team, you'll need to find eggs in monster dens. Now, if you can escape with the egg, you can bring it back to town and hatch it. And having this extra layer of wondering what kind of monster you got before the eggs hatch adds an extra layer of excitement and anticipation. And then trying them out in combat to see what moves they had, what kind of animations they have was also really fun. The other thing that kept me really hooked was the gear. Now, anyone familiar with the core Monster Hunter games knows that the core loop of the game is fighting monsters, getting their parts, and making new gear from it, and that's no different here in Monster Hunter Stories 2. Now, it's not nearly as exhausting to get all the parts, and in fact, you build a whole set instead of individual pieces once you get the parts. And I personally love playing the fashion metagame in RPGs like this. It's one of my favorite things to do. So it was so fun kind of mixing and matching and playing with my character's hair and makeup and making them look exactly how I wanted. To say the least, these two features alone had me so hooked for dozens and dozens of hours. I really loved my time with Monster Hunter Stories 2, and I hope this isn't the last we see of this awesome series. I've been waiting for the Tales series to blow me away, and it finally did this year with Tales of Arise. First of all, this game is just stupid beautiful. Environments are absolutely gorgeous and super detailed. I loved exploring every inch of them to find little secrets and goodies. And also the character designs are fantastic. Each one has great outfits and cool hairstyles, and it was really fun to collect all the different outfits to see how I could get the ultimate outfit. Again, I love playing that fashion metagame. And speaking of which, this was probably my favorite cast of any game this entire year. They each had so much depth and reasons for going on this adventure. Normally in JRPGs, they kind of just join the party for no real reasons, but here they all felt grounded and real. But personally, I loved watching Alphen and Shion's relationship grow more than anybody else. Shion went from being this standoffish character because of her thorns to being totally vulnerable with all the different characters by the end of the game, and it was just so sweet to watch. I will admit that the story kind of fell apart near the end, but overall I really enjoyed my time with it. What really grabbed me more than anything else though was the gameplay. Of course, Tales of Arise has awesome action combat because all the Tales games do. Now what made this more dynamic was all the character switching you do, calling in characters for special attacks, and doing pair-up attacks with other characters to finish enemies off. And what I loved is each character felt so different, and I actually felt like I wanted to play all the different characters. Whether I wanted to play as range with Rinwell, or if I wanted to be an up-close brawler with Law, there was tons of different ways to fight, and whichever way you want to fight with, there's a character for you. Now outside of combat, everything ties together in great ways. You're really incentivized to explore, and that's another one of my favorite things to do in RPGs. Throughout the world, there's materials to grab for building better gear, and there's these owls all over the place to get for better costumes. And again, I love costumes in RPGs, so I had an absolute blast finding all the owls and trying out all these different combinations. And in fact, I loved playing this game so much that I ended up getting the Platinum Trophy. Tales of Arise certainly isn't without its flaws, but it seems to be the game that put the series on the map, even winning Best RPG this year at the Game Awards. Here's hoping they continue to refine the series further and make the next game even better.
Come forth, my monsters, and consume this dark night.
Finally, we have my #1 JRPG and my Game of the Year for 2021, Ys 9 Monstrum Nox. This might be really surprising to a lot of you, but allow me to explain. First off, I'll admit that the story isn't super strong. It can be slow at times, especially the prison sections where you're trying to escape, but there is a really interesting twist halfway through that, of course, I won't spoil, that makes the story worth experiencing. But for me, there wasn't any other game in 2021 that I had more fun playing than Ys 9. As always, the action combat is silky and smooth and so satisfying. The 3-party system from Ys 9 returns where you could swap to any character on the fly. And with the exception of Raging Bull, every character played super fast, and that's my kind of style. My favorite character of the cast was the doll. I loved her acrobatic moveset and how fast she felt, and it was just a pure pleasure to experience her combat style. And a new feature in Ys 9 that I loved was the gifts. These gave you new ways to explore the environments that you've never been able to do in the Ys series before. You can glide off cliffs, you can run up walls, you can zip to spots all over the environments, and tons more. This made something as simple as navigating the world absolutely thrilling. And these gifts made for the most enjoyable experience I've ever had finding all the collectibles in the game. And like Tales of Arise, I also got the Platinum Trophy here in Ys 9 because I just wanted to do everything it had to offer. And of course, we can't forget that absolutely rocking soundtrack. When I found myself in the flow of combat with JDK Band shredding in the background, pure bliss. Sure, there were games with better stories and games with better graphics, but for me, nothing topped the gameplay of Ys 9, and that's why it's my Game of the Year. Now, if you want to know about some hidden gem JRPGs from 2021 that you might have missed, be sure to check out this video right here. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe because coming up next is my big list of JRPGs you can play in 2022. It's a hefty one, so you won't want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.